welcome to another captivating episode of Fighting for Democracy. In this series, we will delve into the minds of American history's most influential figures. I'm your host, Ellen Wheeler, and today, we embark on a journey back in time to have a conversation with one of America's most important founding fathers, President James Madison. Conducting this interview with President Madison is the esteemed Dr. Howard J. Parker, a renowned American history scholar and current professor of colonial and post-Revolutionary War America at Carleton University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Dr. Parker also holds the distinguished title of Regent Emeritus at the American Historical Charter, bringing decades of expertise to bear on this project. Dr. Parker has also been a historical advisor to 4 sitting presidents over the past 30 years. So now, without further ado, let me introduce you to our esteemed guest, Dr. Howard J. Parker. Dr. Parker, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ellen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Parker, I'm curious, how did this interview come about? And why did you decide to begin this series with a conversation with President James Madison?
Well, Ellen, as you know, President Madison is often regarded as the father of the U.S. Constitution. His contributions to its creation are monumental. In launching this series, I felt it was essential to start at the very foundation of American democracy. Understanding Madison's vision and the ideals he championed provides invaluable insight into the principles that continue to shape our nation today.
I, for one, am looking forward to our discussion and audience questions after your interview as we continue to explore the powerful legacy of President James Madison.
Thank you, Ellen. Through the miracle of technology, we are able to travel back in time and meet with the 4th President of the United States. For the purposes of this interview, we gleaned vast resources that formulate the answers to our questions of President Madison. Through the use of technology not available until now, we are able to formulate responses as if President Madison had answered them himself. So I want to thank our audience for joining us on this powerful journey today. And to those that have contributed to the information from which Mr. Madison's answers were constructed, we offer our gratitude. So, here we go. Welcome, President Madison. And I just want to say that right now, more than ever, Americans need your wisdom so that our democracy can continue to thrive. Here is your first question. When drafting the U.S. Constitution, what provisions did you consider most crucial for the stability and success of the new nation?
Thank you for your kind words. Now, in response to your first question. In my estimation, the separation of powers was paramount. By dividing government into 3 branches, the Congress, the executive, and judiciary, we sought to prevent the concentration of power, ensuring a system of checks and balances to safeguard individual liberties. Might I add, however, this system of checks and balances is only as strong as the weakest branch. This means that Americans must endeavor to put only the highest caliber of individuals in the seat of power. Failure to do so will be of great consequence, as a democratic government can only be equal to the virtues of those whom have been given that power.
President Madison, you brought up the concept of virtue in your last answer. So if I may, I'd like to continue down that path for a moment. I understand that you believe moral leadership is essential to safeguarding the underpinnings of the U.S. Constitution. So why is that true?
Morality and virtue are indeed crucial. The success of our democratic experiment relies on individuals of integrity upholding the Constitution. Virtuous leaders are more likely to prioritize the common good over personal interests, ensuring the system functions as intended. A less than morally grounded person will always look for ways to bend or even ignore the rules. That type of individual will always be thinking about only acting in a way that will bring him and his cronies wealth and more power. These actions will be taken at the expense of democracy and make our system ripe for failure.
Considering your emphasis on the importance of virtue, how can a society best cultivate and ensure the presence of moral leadership within its democratic institutions?
Cultivating moral leadership requires an engaged and informed citizenry. Education, civic participation, and a commitment to the values enshrined in the Constitution are vital. Vigilance in holding leaders accountable for their actions is equally important, and it cannot be underestimated in securing democracy from the creep of fascism.
So, Mr. President, we're going to change subject somewhat at this time. In framing the Constitution, How did you and the other document framers address the balance between federal and state powers in order to create a strong yet flexible government?
That was a difficult task, but striking a delicate balance was imperative. The Constitution outlines specific powers for the federal government while preserving states' rights. This federalism was designed to prevent tyranny and help to accommodate diverse regional needs. The U.S. Constitution had to foster a harmonious union between state and federal governments. But there was to be no question left unanswered as to where the decisive power lay.
Mr. President, could you elaborate on the Bill of Rights and their significance in shaping the rest of the Constitution?
Certainly. The Bill of Rights, ratified by the states in 1791, emerged from the recognition that individual freedoms must be explicitly protected for all citizens. These first 10 amendments ensure the people's rights to freedom of speech, religion, and a fair trial. They established a strong foundation for personal liberties that the government deemed essential. Although not addressing the inequalities as to who qualified as a citizen, it laid the groundwork for future advances of universal rights for every man, woman, and child.
The Constitution has mechanisms for amendment. How did you envision this process contributing to the document's longevity and adaptability?
The amendment process was a deliberate choice. Recognizing the need for adaptability over time, it allows for changes reflecting the evolving values and circumstances of the nation. This ensures the Constitution remains a vibrant, living, relevant document. And it does appear that we made the correct decision to provide the mechanisms for amending this country's most enduring document.
What role did your experiences during the drafting of the Constitution play in your great advocacy for a strong national government?
The challenges we faced under the Articles of Confederation revealed the necessity of a more centralized authority. The Constitution aimed to create a government with sufficient power to address national issues while respecting the rights of individuals and states.
Looking at the Constitution's legacy, how would you assess its impact on shaping the United States and its government over the centuries?
The Constitution has proven resilient and adaptable. Its enduring legacy lies in providing a stable framework for governance, fostering democratic ideals, and serving as a beacon for other nations aspiring to secure individual liberties within a centralized, structured government.
Mr. President, we're going to backtrack for a moment as we have a question about a subject addressed a few moments ago. This question is from Alex, who lives in San Antonio, Texas. Alex's question is this. History has shown instances where leaders with questionable honor have risen to power in democracies. In such cases, what mechanisms did you envision within the Constitution to mitigate the potential threats posed by leaders lacking moral character?
The Constitution's system of checks and balances is designed to restrain the abuse of power. The legislative, executive, and judicial branches serve as counterweights to one another, and if need be, the impeachment process stands as a safeguard against leaders who betray the public trust.
President Madison, if a political leader of questionable honor emerges and Congress decides to surrender much of its counterweight powers over the executive branch, what measures do you believe citizens and lawmakers should take to counterbalance such a situation and uphold the principles of the Constitution?
In such a circumstance, an engaged citizenry plays a crucial role. Active participation, open dialogue, and an informed electorate are vital to ensuring accountability to a political actor that no longer feels they have to abide by the same laws as would be expected of ordinary citizens. Additionally, members of Congress must assert their most basic of constitutional duties and act as a check on executive overreach. Failure to do so effectively would breed contempt for the very Constitution which they pledged to defend when being sworn into office, and by doing so would be guilty of a grave offense to the rule of law. The U.S. Constitution does not afford members of Congress the luxury of abdication of their duty to hold the executive branch in check. The free press also plays a vital role in exposing potential abuses and must aggressively report on the facts surrounding the abuses to the public in real time.
President Madison, please expound on the idea of well-regulated state militias.
Yes, I would be happy to give you background on how this provision came about. The prevailing view was that the primary responsibility for organizing and overseeing militias rested with the state government rather than the federal government. The Second Amendment, with its reference to a well-regulated militia, reflects this understanding. The original intent was to give the states authority to form and control their own organized militias. The authorized state-operated militias were composed of ordinary citizens who could be called upon by state authorities to defend against external threats or domestic insurrection. Additionally, the Constitution itself, in Article 1, Section 8, grants Congress the power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. This provision was written as a means for Congress to establish standards and regulations for the militias while still leaving their actual administration to the states. In summary, the intention behind well-regulated militias was for them to be under the command and regulation of state governments, with the federal government playing a limited role in providing oversight and setting general standards. This decentralized approach reflected the founders' concerns about maintaining a balance between state and federal powers. This provision of the Constitution, by no means, was intended to allow private bands of citizens to form their own posses of regulators or enforcers of law.
Mr. President, in the context of our nation's laws and principles, how would you define what constitutes a criminal act of insurgency?
I would define a criminal act of insurgency as any action taken with the intent to violently overthrow or undermine the duly constituted government of the United States. This includes acts such as armed rebellion, insurrection, or treasonous activities aimed at destabilizing the government or inciting violence against its institutions and officials. In my view, the stability and integrity of our democratic government depend on the rule of law and respect for constitutional processes. Any attempt to subvert or overthrow the government through unlawful means constitutes a serious threat to the principles of liberty and democracy upon which our nation was founded. Throughout my presidency, I remained steadfast in upholding the rule of law and defending the Constitution against all threats, both foreign and domestic. I firmly believe that the government has a duty to protect the safety and security of its citizens while safeguarding their constitutional rights and freedoms. Therefore, any president is obligated to take decisive action to suppress any criminal acts of insurgency, ensuring that those responsible are held accountable under the law. This may involve deploying the necessary resources and authorities to restore order, prosecute offenders, and uphold the integrity of our democratic institutions. Ultimately, the office of the president must be committed to preserving the Union, protecting the rights of all citizens, and maintaining the rule of law in the face of any challenge to our nation's stability and security.
Mr. President, if a political party sent individuals impersonating legally elected electoral delegates to the Congress, would that be a violation of law?
Yes, such an action would likely constitute a violation of law. The integrity of the electoral process is fundamental to our democracy, and any attempt to undermine or manipulate it through fraudulent means is unacceptable and potentially illegal. Impersonating legally elected electoral delegates and presenting false credentials to Congress would likely be considered a serious offense. It could involve various violations of federal law, including fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Additionally, such actions would undermine the legitimacy of our democratic institutions and erode public trust in the electoral process. As president, I would have condemned any efforts to subvert the will of the people and would support thorough investigations and legal proceedings to hold those responsible accountable for their actions. Ensuring the integrity and security of our elections is essential to upholding the principles of democracy and preserving the trust of the American people in their government. We must remain vigilant in safeguarding the electoral process from any attempts at fraud or deception.
President Madison, if the U.S. Congress was being attacked by domestic insurgents, whose responsibility is it to protect the Congress?
The American president, as commander-in-chief, has the duty to take decisive action to protect the safety and security of the legislative branch of government and to uphold the Constitution of the United States. First and foremost, the Commander-in-Chief must ensure that all necessary measures are taken to safeguard the lives of the members of Congress, their staff, and any other individuals present within the Capitol. This may involve deploying federal law enforcement to restore order and ensure that the Congress's business is carried out as prescribed by law, without hindrance from the insurgents. Additionally, the Commander-in-Chief would coordinate closely with congressional leadership, including the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader, to assess the situation, provide support, and facilitate communication and decision-making as needed. It is imperative that the rule of law be upheld, and those responsible for the attack must be swiftly identified, apprehended, and brought to justice. The Commander-in-Chief would direct the tools of law enforcement to conduct thorough investigations to hold accountable those who have committed acts of violence or insurrection against the United States Congress. Furthermore, the Commander-in-Chief should address the American people immediately to reassure them of the government's commitment to upholding democracy and protecting the institutions of government. The President should call for unity and calm in the face of adversity, emphasizing the resilience of our democratic system and the importance of respecting the rule of law. Ultimately, the President as Commander-in-Chief has the foremost duty to uphold the Constitution and defend the institutions of our Republic against all threats, foreign and domestic. In the face of an attack on the U.S. Congress, the Commander-in-Chief must fulfill his duty with unwavering resolve and determination to protect our democracy and the values for which it stands.
Thank you, President Madison, for your insightful answers today. And thank you to our audience for your participation in this historical event. Now, let's continue our discussion with host Ellen Wheeler.
Dr. Parker, thank you so much for conducting the interview with President James Madison today for the Voices in Motion podcast. All I can say is that I hope you are as excited as I am to see what questions our listeners have come up with for President Madison.
Absolutely. I'm eager to hear what our audience has on their minds for President Madison as well. I've just gotten the go-ahead signaling that President Madison is ready for the first question.
Wonderful. Let's jump right in. Our first question comes from Thomas in Massachusetts, who asks, President Madison, how did your experiences as a delegate to the Constitutional Convention shape your views on federalism and the balance of powers?
Thank you for your question, Thomas. My experiences as a delegate to the Constitutional Convention were indeed formative in shaping my views on federalism and the balance of powers. During the convention, I witnessed firsthand the complexities of reconciling the interests of the states with the need for a strong and effective central government. The debates and compromises that took place highlighted the delicate balance that needed to be struck between state sovereignty and national unity. Through my participation in the convention, I came to believe that a federal system of government, with powers divided between the national and state governments, was the most effective way to preserve both liberty and order. I advocated for a system of checks and balances, where each branch of government would have the means to restrain the others, thereby preventing any one branch from becoming too powerful. Additionally, my experiences at the convention reinforced my belief in the importance of protecting individual rights and liberties. While I recognized the necessity of a strong federal government, I also understood the dangers of centralized power and the potential for abuse. As a result, I worked to ensure that the Constitution included explicit protections for individual rights, culminating in the drafting and ratification of the Bill of Rights. Overall, my experiences at the Constitutional Convention deepened my commitment to the principles of federalism, limited government, and individual liberty, which guided my actions both during and after my time as a delegate.
Our next question comes from Rachel in Maryland, who asks, President Madison, how did the War of 1812 affect you and your wife Dolly personally, as well as the young country overall?
Thank you for your question, Rachel. The War of 1812 was a challenging and tumultuous time for both my wife Dolly and me personally, as well as for our young nation as a whole. On a personal level, Dolly and I experienced firsthand the anxieties and uncertainties that come with wartime. As the President and First Lady, we bore the weight of responsibility for guiding the nation through this conflict. Dolly in particular played a crucial role in maintaining morale and unity among the American people, even as our capital city of Washington, D.C., was under threat and ultimately occupied by British forces. The war also had significant repercussions for the young country as it tested the resilience of our fledgling republic and forced us to confront our vulnerabilities as a nation. The conflict exposed weaknesses in our military capabilities, infrastructure, and diplomatic relations, while also highlighting the importance of national unity and resolve in the face of external threats. despite the challenges and setbacks we faced during the War of 1812, it ultimately served to strengthen our sense of national identity and solidify our independence from Great Britain. The successful defense of Baltimore, including the inspiring stand at Fort McHenry that inspired our national anthem, demonstrated the courage and determination of the American people in the face of adversity. Overall, while the War of 1812 brought personal and national hardships, it also served as a defining moment in our nation's history, shaping the course of American politics, diplomacy, and identity for generations to come.
And Ellen, I believe President Madison has time for one more question. So let's make it a blockbuster to close out the interview on.
Okay, Dr. Parker, thank you. So winding up our audience's Q&A today is an excellent question from Kate in Bozeman, Montana. Kate asks President Madison, what advice would he give to the country in today's world of tumultuous political gamesmanship and performance politics?
If I were to offer guidance to the country in the 21st century amidst the challenges of political gamesmanship and the prevalence of performance politics, I would emphasize the enduring importance of maintaining a commitment to the principles of Republican government and constitutionalism. First and foremost, I would urge the American people to remain vigilant guardians of our constitutional system of government. In times of political upheaval and uncertainty, it is essential that we uphold the rule of law, respect the separation of powers, and defend the institutions of our republic against any threats to their integrity. Furthermore, I would encourage a renewed focus on the virtues of civic engagement, informed citizenship, and reasoned discourse. In a political climate marked by polarization and partisanship, it is imperative that we seek common ground, respect differing viewpoints, and engage in constructive dialogue to address the challenges facing our nation. Above all, I would remind my fellow citizens that the strength of our republic lies not in the personalities or performances of individual leaders, but in the enduring principles of liberty, justice, and equality upon which our nation was founded. By remaining true to these principles and embracing our responsibilities as citizens, we can navigate the complexities of the 21st century with wisdom, integrity, and resilience.
Thank you, President Madison, for your insightful responses, and thanks to you, Dr. Parker, for guiding us through this enlightening conversation. Before we close, do either of you have any final thoughts?
Ellen, I believe President Madison's wisdom offers us valuable insights into navigating the challenges of our time, reminding us of the enduring principles that have shaped our nation.
Ellen and Dr. Parker, it has been a pleasure to engage in this discussion and reflect on the lessons of history. I hope our conversation has inspired listeners to consider the importance of upholding our constitutional principles in the face of contemporary challenges. Above all, I would remind my fellow citizens that the strength of our republic lies not in the personalities or performances of individual leaders, but in the enduring principles of liberty, justice, and equality upon which our nation was founded. By remaining true to these principles and embracing our responsibilities as citizens, we can navigate the complexities of the 21st century with wisdom, integrity, and resilience.
Absolutely. Thank you both for your contributions. And to our listeners, the Voices in Motion Network, thanks each of you for participating in today's historic podcast. Remember to stay curious and stay informed, and remember that tyranny does not happen in a vacuum, but it is the result of complacent and comfortable people giving the power of their voices away without fighting. Please like and subscribe to our channel and sign up for notifications so you will be alerted when each new conversation with America is uploaded. Until then, this is Ellen Wheeler signing off. Goodbye for now.